Welcome to the Child Welfare Information Technology Systems Managers and Staff webinar series, brought to you on behalf of the Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Family Children's Bureau. My name is Philip Breitenbuscher, and I'm your host for today's webinar. Today's discussion is entitled CCWIS, Build or Buy. We want to encourage your active participation throughout today's presentation. And there are a few ways that you can engage in the discussion. The easiest way would be to submit questions using the Q&A function, using the icon that's similar to the image on the right of my screen. We do ask that you submit all questions using the Q&A rather than the chat function. If you do submit a question to the chat, we will probably ask you to resubmit that to the Q&A. That helps us just manage those questions. You can also ask questions using the raise hand feature. If you do that, we will see that your hand's raised. We will privately chat with you just to confirm that you're ready to unmute your line and ask that question live. Once you confirm that to us in the chat, we will go ahead and call on you and you can ask that question live. If you've called in, you're also able to unmute your line using the *9 feature. Once the presentation is over, we are going to ask you to complete a survey and give us your feedback. Your feedback is very important to us, and we take your feedback and help us improve future webinars. We also want to note that today we will conclude the presentation at the top of the hour. However, we have reserved 15 extra minutes for continued Q&A, and you're welcome to stay on during that Q&A portion. So we hope that's helpful for you. If after you leave today's webinar, you continue to have questions, you're welcome to submit those questions, one to your analyst, or you can also submit those questions by emailing us at cwis.questions@acf.hhs.gov. All right, let me introduce to you the presenters for today's webinar. First, you will hear from David Allenson. He's a federal analyst in the Division of State Systems. We also have the privilege and honor of having several state representatives. From Idaho, you'll hear from Colleen Villegas and Clint Walker. From Massachusetts, you'll hear from Christine Bailey and Tommy Abram. In Mississippi, you'll hear from Charlie Case. Michael Patton is unable to be with us today due to an emergency. So thank you, Charlie. And from Utah, we'll have Jonathan Hauser. Once again, my name is Phil Breitenbuscher. I'm Federal Contract Support to the Division of State Systems, and I will serve as your moderator. Today's presentation will start with some opening comments, and then we'll move directly into hearing from the states and their experiences, answering that key question, whether to build or buy. We will conclude with some key themes, and then we'll move into a question and answer period. With that, it's my distinct honor to hand things off to David Allenson. David?
Thank you, Phil. Welcome to all to the Build It or Buy It webinar. I'm so glad that so many states want to take the opportunity to learn from our peers about their child welfare IT development experiences. The focus of this webinar will be on what these states considered as they were deciding which direction to proceed. What's the best approach for developing their IT systems? Each state will introduce themselves, provide basic information about their state, their child welfare program, and their IT system, and then tell you their story and about how they got there, including key drivers and decision makers, staffing and capacity considerations, child welfare business process impact, and current status and lessons learned. Following each presentation, and after we finish all the state presentations, we'll have time for questions and answers. And now, to get started with our first state, Idaho, over to you, Clint.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Clint Walker, and I'm a project manager in Idaho. I was a member of a leadership team that managed and successfully completed the Idaho Child Welfare Modernization Project. This included the implementation of a CCWIS application. I'm now involved with the CCWIS application. However, now I assist with the maintenance and operation efforts. With me in Idaho is Colleen Villegas. Colleen?
Hi, I'm the automated system manager. I'm over the CCWIS help desk and analysts, and then I work with Clint on new development. I joined Idaho's Department of Health and Welfare a couple of years after go live. It's been really interesting to learn about the challenges that they experienced during the project. But since then, I've definitely seen the benefits and improvements that the system has introduced. Take it away, Clint.
Thanks, Colleen. All right, the Idaho Child Welfare Modernization Project started with visioning in July of 2017 and concluded with the implementation of the final phase of our CCWIS application, known as SB, in November of 2020. Idaho chose to go the buy route, partnering with a systems integrator to implement a cloud-hosted Dynamics 365 CCWIS solution. In addition to the CCWIS application, we implemented a portal that is accessible to our foster parents. We also implemented a number of interfaces, the major ones being a real-time interface with the NIES Clearinghouse for our ICPC kids, and a batch interface with the State Controller's Office for all of our foster care, subsidy, and service payments. For reporting, we replicate our data to an Azure SQL database and utilize Tableau to meet all of our leadership and management reporting needs. Let's get into the Idaho experience. Next slide, please. A build versus buy decision is not an easy decision to make. The key drivers in our decision-making process were the project timeline. We wanted to be successful in the shortest amount of time possible and avoid a lengthy project. Technical skills. We determined that we wanted a cloud solution. This would be the first cloud solution at Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, and our IT department did not have staff that possessed the skill sets needed. We knew that this would be an area that we needed help in. Risks. No project wants to fail, and the Idaho legislature made it clear that they wanted a guarantee of success. They wanted visibility to the project, they wanted to see incremental successes, and they were adamant that they would only approve funding when milestones were reached. To help Idaho reach a decision of build versus buy and be confident in that decision, we spent time rock turning, which is the term we use to explore what other states were doing and what technology options might be available to us. We had open discussion with our IT leadership about the commitments and the skill sets needed to deliver a modern system and modern technologies. Ultimately, the project management team and our department leadership agreed that the best chance of success was to buy rather than build. Next slide, please. One of the key factors that helped Idaho be successful as it relates to staffing was the identification of caseworkers and supervisors that we felt would become good champions of a new system and would radiate their enthusiasm out to workers in the field. These key people were moved from their roles in the regional offices and were dedicated to our CCWIS project. Because of our decision to bring in an existing system instead of building new, these individuals were able to identify gaps instead of providing requirements for a new build. They were also instrumental in testing the new system and adjusting business processes. As with any project, leadership is critical. In Idaho, we had great involvement and support from our department's leadership team. One takeaway worth mentioning is that managing scope seemed to be a little different because we opted to bring in a system. We established a scope council, and any functional requirement that was not in the base system was evaluated. If it was determined that it was a CCWIS requirement, then our systems integrator had a course of action to take. If it was not a CCWIS requirement, it was considered to be a customization. Our goal was to limit the amount of customizations, so if a request was not a must-have, it was added to a backlog for post-project work. My last item here calls out the role of the legacy developers, the role the legacy developers had in our project. I cannot stress how vital these individuals were to our success. In my opinion, the challenge of data migration is bigger when you buy compared to when you build. I say this because with a build, your data model will be designed and it will evolve as development progresses. This gives the technical teams time to become familiar with the structure. However, with buy, the data model is essentially complete and delivered. Having individuals that understand the data in the legacy system and the skills needed to extract and transform the data was a key to success. Next slide, please. Right, business impacts. Success for Idaho meant the implementation of a CCWIS application built on a modern technology stack, but it also included improving business processes. Bringing in an existing system that was built to support business processes differently to the legacy system meant the new processes didn't have to be designed. Instead, business analysts focused on adjusting and improving processes to align with the new automated system. This also provided the opportunity to develop and implement a plan for consistent practice across the state. Similarly, trainees were able to get familiar with the new system early in each phase of the project and develop their training curriculum. They were able to broadcast the changes that were coming, and this helped staff learn the differences between the old system and the new. And this was a key factor in our change management successes. Next slide, please. Our current status is healthy. All maintenance and enhancements to our SP application is handled by our product team that is comprised of analysts, testers, and developers. We no longer rely on our integration partner. New features have been added, and some parts of the system have been changed to improve the user experience. We have developed a good software development lifecycle, as well as a feedback loop for our end users. For the items that I listed in the lessons learned below, basically the big lesson is prepare. Prepare as much as possible. Gather or create documentation on your legacy system. That would be the data dictionary, the data model, documentation on your batch processes, interfaces. As I mentioned, we included field staff in our project team, and it would have been very helpful for them to understand how a project operates, the terminology used, and the best practice. Some people that were on our project have never been involved in a big project before, and it was a bit of a shock to their system. Testing was a challenge for us. The amount of testing needed in a short amount of time was at times overwhelming for our testers, made more difficult by not having a consistent testing methodology defined up front. The testing of batch processes and interfaces was also a challenge. I would recommend developing a process that allows you to compare results to the legacy system whenever possible. In closing, partnerships and relationships are key to success. There were many challenges for us, but fortunately, we had established a good relationship with our vendor, and as a team, both parties were willing to adapt to the challenges. Thank you all, and I'd like to now hand over to Massachusetts.
Thank you. Tommy Abraham, CIO with the Department of Children and Families, Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a non-CWIS system. We were CCWIS. We opt to be a non-CWIS system in 2017. Just to give a glance of the data, in Massachusetts, we receive about 100,000 child abuse reports in a year, manage about 25,000 families. There are about 9,000 children in placement, and there are 4,000 to 4,500 agency staff users, and we also have 10,000 provider users and 40,000 partners. This includes foster parents, citizens, attorneys, and so on. The basic characteristics of the system, it's a state administered system. It's only one state agency managing the entire state with about 35 field offices. There are no county administered systems in Massachusetts. Our technology is a consolidated organization. Infrastructure and networking and other aspects are consolidated, while as the application development is closer to agency itself. The staffing is a combination of state staff, some staff augmentation contractors, and a set of solution integrators. The application portfolio consists of multiple applications. To start with, it's our biggest application, the enterprise case management system, is called iFamilyNet. It's a on-premise custom-built application in Java and Oracle. It's probably one of the largest child welfare case management systems in the United States, which manages from child abuse reports to Title IV automation and claiming. And everything in between. We have other services to manage foster parents, or foster parents can interact with the agency and get information. Mandated reporters can submit their accessory documents after they report child abuse, and child attorneys and other volunteers also will have access to our systems through this portfolio of partner services. Apart from our case management system, we have specialized systems primarily used for use cases that are geared towards foster care recruitment, ombudsman management, a service desk to assist with the payment or subsidy assistance and payment lines, and so on. It's primarily using Salesforce as the SaaS system. For analysis and reporting, we have multiple tools, including Microsoft Power BI for our business intelligence applications, for Jasper for online reporting applications, and our data warehouse is being migrated to Snowflake from Oracle as we speak. So that is our technology portfolio. And I'll have Christine Bailey, our senior project manager, take it from here.
Great, thanks, Tommy. So in terms of our decision to build versus buy, that was actually a decision that we had made a while ago because we had such a large and functional CCWIS that we had already been web enabling. It had mobile features that there was a really big hurdle to overcome. And as we looked at the different buy systems out there, it was just not sufficient benefit compared to what we already had developed in-house. And as Tommy mentioned, it's not just for our staff, but we do have about 10,000 of our providers who use our system every day. So to retrain and teach people and to develop all the functionality for them as well, it was more efficient for us to continue to custom develop, with the exception of some specific features where we looked at using products. Another driver for us was after a fairly tragic situation back in 2015, 2016, the Child Welfare League of America did a review of Massachusetts and came up with a series of reform recommendations. And out of that, the governor made an agency improvement leadership team who had a series of systemic reforms, and they really needed to be made in their timeframes and in the way that they needed to, which really drove us towards needing to have a custom solution that we were able to meet our policies in the way that they were drafted by the governor and by the legislation. And a final kind of driver for us was also about the cost and the funding model. So we've been fortunate to have consistent funding, but we didn't have a large amount of upfront capital funding that we would need to develop a new system or to buy a new system. And with our large subscription base of about 15,000 people using it on a daily basis, a subscription cost model quickly exceeded our entire budget. So we chose to continue doing custom systems, but using COTS and low-code application platforms in specific scenarios for specific use cases where appropriate. Next slide. So one of the things that's a little bit unique, I think, to Massachusetts in terms of how we've chosen to staff our project, as Tommy mentioned, we have a combination of state staff and contractors, as well as we do have multiple system integrators that work with us. So at any one point in time, we tend to have 3 or 4 integrators, including a very large, kind of well-known national company, and then some smaller integrators that work with us. And we found this to be really advantageous. We feel like we're able to get the best of the capabilities of each of the integrators. One tends to focus on the COTS and is strong in that. Another one of our integrators is really good with interfaces. Another one focuses more on the usability design for our public-facing portals. And we feel like we've been able to get the best of those different vendors. But the downside of that is it certainly requires a lot of internal management and project management and coordination on our side. So it's something that we're glad we do, and we've gotten a lot of benefit out of it, but it certainly has required a lot of work and management and coordination on our side. The other thing just that is obvious but cannot be understated on the, if you go the custom route, is we are extremely interdependent on the actions of our leadership team and our shared technology services staff and our policy folks. So we really needed to have a very strong working relationship with them, and we do, but without having the product to kind of back on, we are very reliant on them and they on us. We also need to make our own internal commitment to our continual learning and innovation to make sure that we are staying up to date with all of the latest in the technology stack and in all of the business processes, because we're not getting the new releases and the new things. It's on us to make sure that we are staying up to date on it. And one thing, whether it was custom or COTS for us, we are continually struggling with. We use an agile process. Even our leadership team uses an agile process, but we are still in a fairly standard budgeting yearly based process. So the challenge of kind of fitting in incremental releases, changing needs with fixed price contracts and yearly budgeting has been a challenge that I think probably many states face. Next slide. In terms of the business process, we have felt that keeping with a largely custom route has been extremely advantageous on the business process side. We have tremendous flexibility to address whatever the evolving business process and priorities are. There are a lot of state-specific policies and preferences that we've been able to meet and meet quickly. And we recently had a child and family services review where we saw that the areas where the system functionality exists, it is really helping reinforce the business process and the policies and promoting consistency. And we tended to score well on areas where the system had supporting functionality, less well where the system didn't. So we found it to be something that's been very, very helpful in terms of supporting the business. Obviously, the flip side of that is when you can develop anything that needs to be developed, that can take a very long time, and you really have to fight against the urge to specialize and to make things overly complex, and also not to just automate a business process that was maybe developed or codified in policy 5, 10, 15 years ago based on the technologies of the day. So we spend a lot of time working with our business owners, redoing the business process, doing business process engineering, trying to get at the underlying need, the underlying reasons, not sort of the hows that it's been implementing, but really get into the why. So that's been a challenge. And obviously, you lose out on the opportunity to leverage knowledge from other states and other things that may be using a similar product. Next slide. So in terms of where we are and what we've learned, we have a very comprehensive mobile-friendly solution out there. We've really been focusing recently on incorporating natural language processing and some of the modern machine learning into our suite, and using our infrastructure to take more and more advantage of some of the cloud services and things that are out there. That is a big focus for us. We're really looking at how to use data better to help inform our thinking and decision making, and how do we responsibly continue to use natural language processing and other artificial intelligence technologies to support the work. And I think the other focus area for us, because we have a system that supports our staff well, is really to turn our focus now to how we better support our families and our partners. And we're very focused first on our adolescent and young adult population, who are both the recipients of the services and folks that are transitioning out. So we're really trying to take what we have and done a good job with our staff and really change our focus to also focus on the families. The main thing I think that I would say that we've learned, I think everyone knows how important governance and communication is, but for us, it didn't really start working well until IT became part of the regular recurring agency meetings. So Tommy participates in weekly meetings with our commissioner and the executive team. We go regularly to all sorts of meetings, and I think being part of the sort of day-to-day fabric and not feeling something separate and distinct has really made a difference and has been able to help us do the customizations and understand what we need. The other thing I would just reiterate is we've done a good job, I think, of getting feedback from our staff and incorporating in the team, but I think we've learned that we are not always representing the family's perspectives, the foster parents, and there's a lot to learn by hearing direct from the source. So we're really committed to doing that, looking at that and having data and direct feedback from the end users who are the end people that we're serving as well. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Charlie from Mississippi.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charlie Case. I am the program director for our Pathways project, which is the name of our CCWIS solution. We are in the process of implementing a COT solution currently. So we're just finished design work, and we're finishing up some design work around finance. And then we're going to be moving into our development and configuration and moving into sit-in testing and some other things with our project. We decided in 2019, when I got on board here, to go with COTS, and I'll explain those drivers in just a minute, but we wanted an end-to-end solution. Everything included in this SaaS COTS environment, from all of our modules, our provider portal, mobile access, everything under one umbrella. And that was the decision. And I'll go into some of those key factors now as we switch slides that drove us to that decision. One of those was time. At the time when we made this decision, the agency was in a lot of transition. We were under some leadership transition. We were separating from DHS. We had a court-ordered obligation to replace our system with a deadline in place. And so that deadline was really a driving factor for us to move forward with a solution that we determined was quicker, could be faster for us to implement, and the cost could be less. We also had some obligations with our legislation here that had set aside money to meet that obligation to move into a new system. They designated those funds for us to use, and there was a real driving factor for that money to be used and to be used quickly. So with that transition, we released an RFP in 2020, and we selected our vendor from that procurement. The other factor that we wanted with that procurement was to have a single contract. We didn't want multiple contracts that we had to manage for the entire solution. So that was also a driving factor at the time. So a lot of our decisions were implemented due to these types of incidents and factors and transitions that the agency was going through in 2019. The next thing that I would mention in our slides about our capacity, building our team, our staffing, and those considerations was pretty extensive, and that's on the next slide. We had a lot of discussions around the teams we needed, the people we needed to be on those teams. We finally had got a leadership in place that was driving those factors and building those and making the project a priority across the agency. So we were able to build a pretty strong SMEs group for all of our modules. We recruited about 77 individuals throughout the agency to be our SMEs and to attend all of our JAD sessions. And we've also, from some of this group, we actually moved some individuals over to our IT group to be a part of our PMO team as well, to be across a bridge across clinical and functional in this process. We also formed a governance committee, a leadership steering committee that was going to provide project governance, and we set some conditions around that and how we were going to administer the project and who was going to make those decisions when factors of changes came in, who got to review those. So we implemented a very strong steering committee leadership group to do that. We also had built a PMO group from scratch and built that group up to handle our implementation process, which were divided up into work streams. And so we have 4 work streams in our project, which 3 of them were over the modules and clinical functions, while the 4th work stream focused on technical functions such as conversion, migration, reporting, and interfaces. And so we ran those JAD sessions in those processes consecutively in tandem with each other across those work streams through the PMO. Another thing we did is we focused on our data. We started doing a lot more data governance. We started organizing and conceptualizing how we want to capture this data, how we're going to report this data, what data elements are needed. So there was a lot of effort put forth into that area, to where we even formed our own data management team and staffed that team to start focusing in on our data elements for our data governance and the purpose of reporting that even to ACF. And another factor we really tried to consider is our change management. You know, we were an agency that had been using a legacy system for about 23 years. It was developed in VB6, which is very, old and not easy to maintain and change. And so the agency has had several starts and stops with the project going to a new application. So there was a lot of naysaying among the staff about ever seeing a new application, brought to life or brought to go live. So we had a very strong focus on change management. We wanted a good message to go out. We wanted to bring the staff along with us. We formed change champion groups. We Also did peek into pathways so staff could see what we were doing as we were doing it. A lot of transparency in that area to bring the agency on that journey with us as we're going through the implementation. On our next slide, we had some really strong impacts to our business and practices. So with the new leadership, we were doing a reorg structure on the agency, and this was happening while we were doing JAD and design. So it was complicated to manage all this, to make sure that all ends meet during this reorg. We also developed service areas and the way we manage those and how those work throughout the state. The agency also wanted to implement SDM into their intake process and those assessments that go along with that. So that was another item that we had to address in our implementation. And then they wanted to replace a lot of manual process with automation. In Mississippi, we had our main system, but we also have other tool sets that we use to manage and to do other processes depending on the area that's doing the work, whether that's foster parent or whether that is our clinical resources or services that we're requiring. We've tracked those in several different areas. So we wanted to make sure that that business impact was addressed when we were moving into the new system. In our finance module, we really wanted to address a centralized approach for finance and move away from county check writing and county bookkeeping to where the state didn't have full transparency into all the transactions that were going on in real time. So that was another area that was impacted with our project that we've implemented in our new approach. And then we had just a total refocus on agency reporting. What are we reporting? What numbers do we need? What kind of evaluation do we need on those numbers? What kind of analytical approach are we going to take? So that was another area that was affected in this project. And these are just a few, and probably the most that had the most impact, but there were even more that were affected in this process. In closing, I don't know if we've met any real lessons learned from end to end since we're still implementing. We are set for a go live date in May of 2025, but we have learned some lessons, I think, in the portion of the project that we've been experiencing. And one of those is, that we would suggest is that you just have a real good, clear understanding of the vendor's proposal, what they said, and not just that the agency and your team understands that, but that you've reviewed that with the vendor, and the vendor with the boots on the ground understand what was in their proposal. We've had several instances where we brought something up, the vendor said, well, that's not going to be done. And we were like, well, that's in your proposal. You should know that. So review that proposal with the vendor, we think, is a key thing to remember. Also, don't hesitate to hold the vendor accountable. This is another thing where we can get into a situation where we just do acceptance and we accept whatever we can get to move on. But if they've got failures, if there's mistakes, those need to be called out and they need to be held accountable for that. And then, lastly, I think that in any project that you attempt to do, there needs to be a contingency plan in place. What if? The what ifs need to be addressed, at the beginning. And what if this doesn't work? What are we going to do? What if this fails? What's going to happen? And it's probably good to have an idea of that at the beginning of your project versus at the time that you need it, and then it has to be developed. So something that we would suggest is, that from a lessons learned, you may want to talk about contingencies planning at the beginning of your project, whatever that's buy or build, whatever that's going to be. Well, thank y'all for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan in Utah.
All right. Hey, CCWIS family. It's good to be with you guys today. I am not going to, let's see what we got on the slide here. So I'm not going to go through all the details on this software stack, but as you look through this, if you end up having questions about some of the technologies we're using, feel free to reach out to me or my counterpart on the business side, Jennifer Larson. One thing I am going to say about this stack, though, is it's going to continue to evolve. we're trying to follow some department standards as well as Amazon's well-architected framework that informs security, reliability, cost, and performance. Even if you're not using Amazon as a cloud provider, I'd highly suggest looking over that framework. The concepts in there, they just help you make sure you're building your application on a solid foundation. All right, next slide. Okay, so in-house or vendor, when we completed our various analysis activities, the agency really wanted to keep the project in-house. We had a well-established team from our CCWIS development. We also had experience with vendor platforms for other workflows that weren't related to CCWIS. The team had built a lot of trust with the agency, and we had a good track record on delivering what they needed. And then another bonus is they felt like they really benefited from having access to a dedicated technical team. For example, I often consult with the agency on initiatives that aren't CWIS related, but they have a technical component to it. Now, with that being said, it did require us to take a hard look at the team and where our skills gaps were, but I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. Let's see. So the other question on if we were going to participate, for us, this definitely was not black and white. The truth was we didn't have consensus. Some people were very opposed to it, and others are, why wouldn't you participate? And then others were everywhere in between. So again, we did a bunch of analysis activities, including having our federal analysts come out and spend several days with us, because we really wanted to make a good decision. But the reality is, on projects like these, they're so complex with so many unknowns, it can be really difficult to ever be completely certain. The thing that really helped move us forward is at the time we were trying to decide, the state Senate bill came out, and among other things, the bill would have required us to completely rebuild our CPS module. And we realized this was the perfect opportunity to do a CWIS pilot. And we knew if we could produce something that, one, met CWIS requirements, two, it satisfied that Senate bill, and three, was something that the agency liked, and we knew we could fully commit to CWIS. That pilot ended up working out great. It met all our objectives. And with that, we knew we were going to jump all in. So if you're at a spot where you're not really quite sure how to move forward, this is my number one suggestion. Do a pilot, whether that's with a vendor or in-house. It's super important that you either fail fast or succeed. And either way, you're going to have way better information on how to proceed. Next slide. Okay, staffing and capacity. So I mentioned earlier, when we decided to attempt this in-house, we knew we needed to address a few things. One of those was how we were managing our project. As we transitioned from our CCWIS into a CWIS, we were kind of going from this place of stability with an established process to a place with many more unknowns. We knew if we were going to be successful, we needed a much quicker feedback loop. We also knew we needed more discipline around how we prioritized and broke up our work. So because of that, we completely overhauled our software development lifecycle, and we adopted a very traditional Scrum methodology, and that has really made a massive difference. The other thing we had to address was the team itself. So up to that point, our developers were highly specialized, and the problem with that is twofold. So one, it can be hard to get a developer that knows one way of doing things to implement new coding patterns and stick with them. And then the other is each module or project requires a different percentage of work from each specialization. You don't ever want to be in this situation where you break out work and prioritize work based on availability of a specific developer. It really should be based on the needs of the project. So moving forward, we really wanted to emphasize full stack developers. We were really upfront with the team about it. In a couple of cases, the developer wasn't interested, so they transitioned to other jobs. But for the most part, the teams embraced it. And I should clarify one thing on that, that full stack is not black and white. When we hire, we do look that the developer has at least the basics across the entire stack. But if we're struggling in a certain area, we might look for extra expertise there. And then the other thing is we also do have a dedicated system architect, which is extremely important. Next slide. Okay, business impact. One thing that has helped our business is as we've been able to schedule releases a lot closer to timelines that work for them. As you guys know, when you implement a new process, sometimes it can take a lot of time to complete worker training, update guidelines, get feedbacks from stakeholders, etc. And the issue is this rarely matches up perfectly with development timelines. So with CCWIS, we've been able to do releases with what we call feature flags. So our team gets the benefit of moving the code base into production, so it's not bloating our dev pipeline. And then the agency gets the benefit of the time they need to finish up whatever they're trying to do. So, and then when everyone's ready, we just flip the flag. And then the next benefit has been around prioritization. With CCWIS, it often felt like even simple requests would turn out to be more difficult due to technical debt and just that interconnectedness of the monolithic code base. Because everything took longer, priorities started piling up, and you ended up playing that game where you had a bunch of priority ones, and you guys all know how that goes. So for the portions of our code base we've migrated, it's been much, much simpler to make changes and prioritize in a way that more aligns to agency values. Okay, and final slide, lessons learned. So this first one's gonna sound a little kumbaya, but I do not care how good your project plan is. If you don't have a solid team culture, you're not gonna be successful. To kind of explain this, several years ago, Google did a study on how to build the perfect team. We felt like the concepts aligned well with what we were trying to achieve. I'm just going to mention a couple of them here. One is meaning. So the work is personally important to team members. And then also impact. Team members think their work matters and creates change. So kind of an ad hoc example of this was during the pandemic when we were fully remote. Our system architect went on a walk during his lunch break. He ended up bumping into a neighbor that turned out to be a CPS caseworker. They got talking, and the worker told them about things he really loved about our application and also some pain points. So when our architect got back from his break, he was really excited to talk about this experience he'd had and all these ideas he had that we could do to improve the system. And we really tried to formalize these type of interactions. Jennifer Larson, my counterpart, has been really good about having developers attend elicitation sessions and other events kind of like that, with like our yearly Child Welfare Institute. It makes a huge difference when your team feels connected to the mission of the agency. The next lesson is, as you build a new CCWIS module, ideally you're doing it in a way where one, you're meeting CCWIS requirements, and two, you're improving some business process. And so for us, it's breaking the code into our microservice architecture, and then you also sit down with business to see what they would like improved. And for many of our modules, that's exactly what we've done. During analysis, we figured out technical implementation along with what the agency would like changed. Now, with that being said, one of our biggest lessons has been that doing that should depend on the module. We found that for some of the more complex modules where the agency knows they want to make a bigger sweeping change, it's actually significantly quicker to do a lift and shift and then later come back and enhance the module. I should clarify one thing on that is even when we're doing a lift and shift on a module, we still try to make some basic improvements. It's just that we're avoiding that really deep business process reengineering. This one I know might seem a little bit surprising or counterintuitive, but we've just found it significantly quicker for these kinds of modules. If you think about it, some of it's been that business can take a long, long time to get all the stakeholders involved when it's a bigger change. We've also found that conversations go way better when there's less abstraction. When they're already using the lifted and shifted module, they're only imagining workflow tweaks instead of that on top of complete changes to user interfaces. And then the other thing, which I know this is going to surprise Teresa, but sometimes child welfare agencies have priorities that are not CCWIS. So in these cases, our team can still make really good progress. And when the agency is ready to work with us on that module, we're way, way closer to the finish line. So on that, just to recap, some modules, we include that business process reengineering right up front, and others we lift and shift and then come back. And then my final lesson is about actively seeking feedback. So one is, overall, we've had really positive feedback about our new modules. However, there's been a few occasions when we assumed things were good and workers were liking what we did, but we later found out that wasn't the case. Caseworkers are busy and stressed out, so they don't always reach out. I think the key there is to be proactive in getting feedback And when they do give feedback, don't be dismissive or defensive, which is sometimes can be hard, especially when you're getting contradictory requests. But even so, it's really important to make sure they feel heard. And then along with agency feedback, I think it's really important to be constantly communicating with your federal team. Our team did one of the early CWIS reviews. I highly recommend doing your first review as early in your process as you can. Kind of like my comments on doing a pilot. It's extremely important to find out early if you're on the right track or not. Our review was really helpful in telling us what we were doing well, as well as some things we could address in future work. And for us, it was a really positive experience. So with that, that concludes my comments about CWIS.
Thank you, Jonathan. Some of the key themes from the state's presentations that we've heard today, the following issues were identified. Under key drivers and decision makers, we heard legislative mandates or court orders can be an issue, time pressures, demonstrate success early and often. Leaders often have priorities that agencies must fulfill, and the use of pilots and early testing create flexibility. If you're going to fail, fail fast so you can adjust. Under staffing and capacity considerations, we heard the importance of agency leadership, project governance, and subject matter experts. Understanding the legacy system is critical for successful data conversion and replicating existing interfaces. And you must balance development approach, such as Agile, with schedule, contract, staffing, and budget constraints. Under child welfare, business process impact, the advantages of a new IT system is consistently implementing practice and policy and providing improved processes. Additionally, new systems provide significant flexibility to address evolving business process and reporting priorities. The challenge is don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And finally, lessons learned. Foster team culture, it's critical foundation for developing an IT system. Governance and communication, regular participation of IT at agency meetings, and manage to the module. Preparation for new systems depend on solid knowledge of the legacy system. Actively seek feedback from staff, families, foster parents, and other partners and groups impacted by system development from the start of design. Take time with a vendor to understand the proposal and hold vendors accountable. And finally, have a contingency plan. Over to you, Phil.
All right. Well, thank you, David, and thank you to all of our panelists. I do want to remind our attendees that you can submit questions using the Q&A feature, and you're also able to raise your hand, and we can unmute your line so you can ask that question live. We've had a number of questions come in. Some of those we've already answered, and some of those now we're going to open up and take those. So I will kind of start from the top here. There was a question that came in during Idaho's presentation, and the question is, who is the integration manager, team, or vendor? And this may be a question that might apply to others as well, but we'll start with Clint.
For Idaho, we partnered with Deloitte for our CWIS project.
Great. Could you, it was hard to hear you there. I'm sorry.
Sorry. For Idaho, we partnered with Deloitte for our CWIS project.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And let's go to the next question here. And this one is for Massachusetts. So Tommy, can you expand, or whoever would like to take this, can you expand on why Massachusetts chose non-CWIS?
Sure. So I said in the second slide, few things. It talks about three reasons why Massachusetts had to choose CWIS. But two things. One is the priorities. As due to a new administration setting priorities for child welfare, the state policies, the state requirements had to take a front seat when compared to CWIS requirements. And at that time, CWIS did not have the flexibility for us to make state requirements a priority. So that was one. Second was cost and funding model. As Christine said, there require a large capital expense required for most of the systems. for the development, while as we took a migration from an existing system, which could be, the expense could be met primarily by our operational funding or an augmented operational funding throughout the years. So those were the two primary drivers for making a non-CWIS decision for Massachusetts. Christine, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think it's changed a little bit from them, but we also had a specific challenge with our provider community. So our provider community already used our CCWIS system very extensively, and the ability for them to transition to do not duplicate entry, because some of them had their own system and were using our system, and for us to get them to kind of meet the requirements and the time frame that we needed with CWIS was challenging at the time. I think that's changed a little bit over the past couple of years, but we had a challenge thinking that we were going to be able to meet that requirement in the time frame we needed to as well. So that was the third driver, I'd say, for our non-CWIS decision.
Excellent, thank you. There was a question that has come in, and the question reads, on the first slide of each of the state's presentations, there was a section that indicated open cases. And the question is this number for open CPS cases only, or does that number include family services, adoption, and foster care cases? And that number refers to open cases, meaning in-home cases and children placed in out-of-home care, not necessarily CPS cases or investigations. But if anyone, any of the panelists, if you included other types of cases in that count, feel free to jump in and correct me. Okay, thank you. And I'm going to take the next question back to Idaho. There was a question that said this: did I hear correctly that Idaho decided to buy a system but is now managing all enhancements and updates internally? And is the vendor still part of your workforce, or is it solely the state?
Right. Yes, you did hear correctly. We bought a system, and kind of as I mentioned, the final phase of that project went live in November of 2020. And by the end of January 2021, our vendor left the project. To do this, during the last phase of our project, we started to build out our own development team. We hired contractors, we trained some state developers, and we always had the intent of this project to take over ownership as soon as possible. So since the first quarter of 2021, we have been doing all the work with the state-run team, and there's no involvement from the vendor.
Great. Excellent. Let me thank you for that response. I appreciate the clarification there. I'm going to just make reference to a couple items here. One, in the chat, everyone now has received our satisfaction survey link. It will also pop up when we leave, but we do want to ask that you can complete the survey. We would love your feedback. You can also use the QR code here on my screen now. We're going to continue taking questions in just a moment, but we wanted to be respectful of everyone's time. And so with that in mind, we're getting close to the top of the hour. I just wanted to draw your attention to this satisfaction survey. Again, it's in the link. All right. And as I said at the top of the presentation today, our presenters have agreed to stay on for some additional time. And so we will be able to have continued questions. So one of the questions that has come in, I think we've responded to it, but I just want to be sure, is that, yes, everyone has received the slide deck. It went out prior for those of you who registered. Okay, one more question. It looks like, Jonathan, you're going to answer that. One of the questions directly. Great, thank you. For Mississippi and Utah, what integrator did they use, and what COTS packages? And we'll just stay in alphabetical order. Can I hand this off to Utah first?
I guess it on my video. It was all in-house for us, so it was all in-house.
Okay, thank you. And Mississippi?
Yeah, for Mississippi, our vendor is Redmayne. And like I said in our presentation, they're providing end-to-end solution. Everything is part of the COTS, and cloud hosting is also part of the services provided.
Thank you. I think there were a couple questions that have been answered directly, but we thought maybe the audience would benefit from them. Let's see here. Let me just grab a couple. You can continue asking your questions using the Q&A feature, and also by raising your hand. There was a hand raised just a moment ago, but it looks like it's been lowered, so we'll move forward. And again, I think this question was directed directly or was directed towards Mississippi, but it may be a question we'd like to have other panelists respond to as well. So how many people does Mississippi have on their data management team?
Yeah, I answered that in the chat. You want me to address it again? Our team, we have 7 members on that, 4 are state employees and 3 are contracts. And they vary with different tool sets, DBA, analytical, Power BI, and then we have several that are clinical, but also have IT experience and understand the complexities of data and what's needed for the data.
Thank you. Here's the question. I think this is directed to our panelists. Are the states willing to host demos for other states interested in seeing the UI?
And Phil, for that question, I think what the states can do, if there is a state that's interested in seeing something from another state, a demo or something, reach out to your federal analyst. We can help coordinate that and see if the states would be willing to do that, because it might be a little bit of a lift. So we just want to make sure that it's acceptable.
Great, thank you, David. Okay, it looks like well, most of the questions have been answered. We have another question that's come in for Utah. What was the cost associated with building in-house, if you have that, and was this a contributing factor in building in-house? So in other words, was cost one of your main drivers?
It was. So the thing, well, it's like I was mentioning about the pilot. The thing that's tricky about doing a good analysis is, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. Vendors are really good at sales, and sometimes things are not obvious up front. And so we knew what our budgets would be like. We knew about the size of team we needed to do. So we were able to do a really clear one on in-house. Although we weren't sure in-house how long it would take us to build things. So, but with that pilot we did, once we had that, we had a very good project plan with costs associated with it. So that was the thing that helped us get it a lot. Like, it was a lot, until that point, it wasn't going to be clear on if it was going to be better with vendor or in-house. So that's really what pushed us over the edge.
Okay. David, do you have any other final comments before we wrap up today?
No, I think I'm good, Phil.
Okay.
Phil, I had one quick question that I put in the chat to the panelists, and it was to Idaho. And I was struck by when Idaho, they talked about it, which was the strength of the leadership. But I was wondering if they could talk a little bit about how they managed expectations they talked about understanding, basically, as a team on the program and IT side, adapting to the system business process rather than the traditional, I think, kind of view of adapting practice to the system. And so I wanted to just hear from them a little bit more about how they did that and what some of the challenges were with that, how they managed that.
Right, I'll take a stab at that. So our project was agile, and at the end of every sprint, we would host sprint reviews that everybody in the state or our current users were invited to. So they got to see early on, what portion of the system was being worked on, what was going to be released as part of the phase. We had a dedicated team, a process team, that would take the to-be functionality in the system and kind of map it to the as-is functionality in the CCWIS system. And then they would host individual sessions with caseworkers and end users to go through in detail, how the work would be done in the new system compared to how it was done in the old system. For the most part, and I would say this, everything was an improvement. Our old legacy system was 30 years old. It had gone through a couple of iterations. It was a mainframe system that got rehosted. So a lot of the business changes or the processes that were in the new system, I mean, practice didn't change, just the workflow and the stages and the handoffs would change. So I don't really feel like we had a lot of issues with managing expectations. People were generally excited about it. It was more around how to coach and how to socialize. This is what you do, and it's going to be a little different in the new system, and this is the benefits that the new system is going to bring with it.
Thank you. Did you use a combination of, was that a state team who did that work, or was it a combination of vendor and state who did that business process work with the staff?
It was a state team, so the face of the project for the process was a state team, but we had assistance from our vendor with preparing the slides and preparing videos and such.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa, and thank you for being with us, Teresa Young, Director of DSS. If you didn't recognize the name or the voice, thank you for being here. And just a comment that has come in and from one of the attendees that we thought we'd just point out to folks, and the comment is this. It's a recommendation, actually. If planning to buy, I recommend detailed review of business process flows covered by the total solution prior to buying. So great comment. Thank you for that. And thanks, Jonathan, for also kind of expanding on that as well. All right, we have a few questions. This is to each of our state panelists. From the start of planning to the development date, how many months did it take? And maybe we'll just go in order that we presented in. So we'll go ahead and start with Idaho, if you have that.
I'm trying to do a calculation in my head real quickly.
Yeah.
It was about 3 years.
Okay, excellent. And Massachusetts, Tommy?
Massachusetts had a bimodal development. So we were developing features in our current system along with doing the migration. So I would say it's about 6 to 7 years that it took for Massachusetts to complete from start to finish.
And Mississippi, I know you're getting ready to launch, right?
Right. Well, we started planning and procurement back in April of 2019, and we are set to go live next year in May 2025.
Excellent. And wrap up with Jonathan in Utah.
We set a 5-year plan. It's the same team that manages the legacy system and all the new work. And the one curveball we got that adjusted that a little bit was the state got rid of their data center, so we had to migrate to Amazon in the middle of this, and so that was a fun curveball. But yeah, so 5-year plan, so it'll end up being 6 when we're completed.
Okay, excellent. Okay, it looks like we have answered all the questions that have come in so far. A comment from Teresa Young, just great job. I'll echo her comments here. Thank you so much to the panelists for sharing your expertise and your time and your experiences. We really appreciate that. Getting great feedback also in the chat and in the questions. So I want to thank everyone. Thank you, David Allenson, for leading this webinar, and also Teresa Young for jumping in and offering some great content as well. And lastly, I just want to thank all of our attendees. Once again, thank you so much for the work you do on behalf of children and families. Please complete the satisfaction survey so we can include your feedback in future webinars. And with that, we will conclude today's webinar. Thank you for being with us.